You open your banking app and the numbers don't look terrible. You're paying your bills. You're not completely out of control. And yet, there's this constant, quiet feeling that you're behind. Like everyone else figured something out that you didn't. Like no matter how much you earn, it never translates into real progress. And the strangest part is this: the more you try to fix it, watching videos about money, trying to save, trying to be disciplined, the more confusing it gets. Because the problem doesn't feel like math. It feels like something deeper. If that sounds familiar, subscribe, because in this video, we're not just talking about money. We're decoding the psychology behind why millennials experience money the way they do, and why so many people feel financially stuck even when, on paper, they shouldn't be. There's a quiet tension that defines this generation. On paper, everything should be working. You're more educated than the people before you. You have access to more information, more tools, more opportunities than any generation in history. You know how money works. You've watched the videos. You've read the advice. You understand saving, investing, side hustles. And yet, something doesn't add up. Because even when progress is happening, it doesn't feel like progress. It feels like catching up, and somehow always being late. This is the part no one explains clearly. The financial experience of millennials isn't just about numbers, it's about perception, pressure, and a system that quietly changed the rules while keeping the expectations the same. You were raised with a script: study hard, get a degree, build a stable life, own a home, start a family. That script wasn't just advice, it was presented as the natural sequence of adulthood. But what happens when the first step in that script becomes the very thing that blocks everything that comes after it? Because the reality is this: for many, the cost of entry into adulthood has never been higher. Student debt alone has grown into something massive, over $1.57 trillion. And it doesn't just sit there as a number. It follows you. It delays decisions. It changes timelines. It quietly shapes how you think about risk, stability, and even your own future. And it's not just debt, it's the environment surrounding it. Housing has become increasingly inaccessible. For people in their late 20s, home ownership rates have dropped to levels that used to be considered abnormal, around 34%. Not because people don't want stability, but because the path to it has narrowed. Down payments are higher, lending is stricter, prices have moved faster than income. So what used to be a milestone now feels like a distant target. So something subtle starts to happen. When traditional milestones become harder to reach, your brain doesn't just accept that and stay neutral. It adapts. It searches for alternatives. It looks for other ways to feel progress, identity, and belonging. And that's where money quietly changes its role. It stops being just a tool for survival or long-term planning and starts becoming something else. A way to feel present, a way to feel included, a way to feel like you're not falling behind. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: when stability feels delayed, immediacy becomes more valuable. And in a world where everything is happening in real time, every trip, every event, every upgrade being constantly displayed, your sense of normal shifts without you realizing it. You're no longer comparing yourself to your neighbors. You're comparing yourself to a global highlight reel. And this is where things get more complex than simple good or bad spending. Because from the outside, it's easy to say people are just making poor financial decisions, that they should save more, spend less, be more disciplined. But that explanation is too shallow for what's actually happening, because behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum. It responds to context. When nearly half of millennials don't have enough savings to cover 3 months of expenses, that's not just a budgeting issue. It's a sign of financial fragility built into the system. When financial literacy is low, for about 76% of the generation, it's not just ignorance, it's a gap between complexity and preparation. And when financial stress starts showing up as anxiety, sleepless nights, irritability, it stops being a financial topic and becomes a psychological one. So the real question isn't, why are people spending like this? The real question is, what are they trying to compensate for? Because, when you zoom out, the pattern starts to make more sense. If long-term stability feels uncertain, then short-term meaning becomes more important. If ownership feels out of reach, then experience becomes the next best form of value. If identity used to be built through milestones, now it's being built through moments. And that shift didn't happen randomly, it happened as a response. Because when the system changes, behavior follows. There's a moment where this stops being about money and starts being about perception. Because if you look closely, the real pressure millennials feel isn't just financial, it's comparative. It's not only about what you have, it's about what it looks like everyone else has, and, more importantly, what it looks like you're missing. This is where psychology enters in a way most people underestimate. Because the human brain was never designed to process thousands of lives at the same time. It was designed to compare locally, neighbors, friends, people within reach. But now, without realizing it, you're constantly exposed to a global stream of curated lives. Vacations, restaurants, festivals, luxury items, upgrades, all edited, filtered, and presented at their best moment. And your brain doesn't treat that as entertainment. It treats it as reality. This is what psychologists describe through something called social comparison and relative deprivation. You don't measure your life in isolation. You measure it relative to what you see around you. So even if your situation is objectively stable, it can feel insufficient if the reference point is constantly shifting upward. And this is where one of the most powerful forces shaping financial behavior today appears: FOMO, the fear of missing out. On the surface, FOMO sounds simple. It sounds like a small emotional reaction, but in reality, it has a direct behavioral impact. Research shows that nearly 70% of millennials experience FOMO in a consistent way. And more importantly, it doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how you spend. Because when you feel like you're missing something, your brain doesn't process that as a neutral absence. It processes it as loss, as exclusion, as being left behind socially. So spending becomes less about the thing itself and more about what that thing represents: inclusion, presence, relevance. That's why someone might spend money on an event they can't comfortably afford. From the outside, it looks impulsive, but internally, it feels like preventing a loss. Not a financial loss, a social one. And this is where the dynamic becomes even more complex. Because alongside FOMO, another psychological pattern has been quietly growing, what some experts call money dysmorphia. This is when your perception of your financial reality becomes distorted. You might have income, you might even have savings, but the internal feeling is still one of scarcity. Around 41% of millennials report feeling broke or financially behind, even in cases where their net worth has been increasing. And this creates a strange paradox. You can be objectively progressing and still feel like you're failing. Part of this comes from what could be described as invisible money, assets that exist on paper, retirement accounts, long-term investments, future potential, but don't feel accessible in daily life. Your brain doesn't fully register them as security. It registers what is immediately available. So even if your long-term situation is improving, your short-term perception remains unstable. But there's another layer to this, one that's harder to notice. The environments you consume daily are not neutral, especially on social media. There's an entire ecosystem built around displaying wealth in a way that feels attainable, even when it isn't. Luxury routines presented as normal life. High-end experiences framed as everyday habits. Constant signals that suggest this is what success looks like now. And over time, this quietly resets your internal baseline. So what used to feel like progress now feels average. What used to feel like enough now feels behind. And this is where behavior starts to shift in a very specific direction. Because if your internal baseline keeps moving, then satisfaction becomes harder to reach. And when satisfaction becomes unstable, consumption becomes more emotional, more reactive. Less about long-term planning and more about immediate alignment with what feels socially relevant. This is not random. It's a psychological feedback loop. You see more, you compare more, you feel less, you compensate more, you repeat. And the more this loop runs, the harder it becomes to separate what you actually want from what you've been conditioned to believe you should want. So when people say, just be more disciplined, they're ignoring the environment shaping the behavior, because discipline alone doesn't break a system that's constantly feeding comparison, urgency, and perceived scarcity. But here's where the conversation becomes more nuanced, because not all of this is purely negative, and what looks like irrational spending might actually be pointing to something deeper that most financial advice completely ignores. But here's where the story becomes more interesting, because if you look at this behavior only through the lens of bad financial decisions, you miss something essential. Not all of this is irrational. Not all of this is a mistake. In many cases, it's an adaptation. Because when a generation realizes, consciously or not, that certain long-term milestones are delayed or uncertain, the value of the present changes. If owning a home feels distant, then experiences feel more urgent. If stability feels fragile, then moments feel more meaningful. And this is where the shift toward what economists call the experience economy starts to make more sense. Data shows that around 78% of millennials prefer spending money on experiences, things like travel, concerts, events, over physical goods. And this is often framed as a lifestyle choice, as if people simply decided that memories matter more than possessions. But when you connect this behavior to the broader financial context, it becomes clear that it's not just preference, it's response. Because experiences offer something that feels accessible, immediate, real. You may not be able to buy a house right now, but you can go to a festival. You may not be able to build long-term equity, but you can create a moment that feels meaningful. And more importantly, experiences solve something psychological that material goods no longer solve the same way: connection. Around 77% of millennials say their best memories come from live events, and about 69% believe these experiences make them feel more connected to the world around them. So when someone spends money on an experience, it's not always about consumption. It can be about belonging, about identity, about feeling part of something in a world that often feels unstable. And this is where the interpretation needs to change. Because from the outside, it's easy to say, they're wasting money. But internally, the equation looks different. It's not just money to purchase, it's money to meaning. But here's the nuance that makes this more complex. Not everyone is doing this for the same reason. For some people, spending on experiences is intentional. It aligns with their values. It replaces things they don't care about with things that genuinely improve their life. This is closer to what movements like FIRE have adapted into. Cut aggressively where it doesn't matter. Spend freely where it does. Freedom over excess. Choice over accumulation. But for others, the same behavior can come from a very different place. Not clarity, but pressure. Not intention, but comparison. Two people can spend the same $500 on the same event. One walks away fulfilled. The other walks away with anxiety, wondering if they made a mistake. The behavior is identical. The psychology is not. And this is where the conversation usually gets oversimplified, because most financial advice treats behavior as if it comes from a single source. Spend less, save more, invest. But real behavior is layered. It comes from environment, identity, past experiences, and emotional regulation, not just logic. Which brings us to something even deeper. Because your relationship with money didn't start when you got your first paycheck. It started much earlier. Through what some researchers describe as money memory. The way your parents talked about money, the stress you witnessed, the arguments, the scarcity, or even the silence around it. All of that leaves traces, and those traces shape how you respond to money later in life. For some people, that turns into anxiety-driven saving. For others, it turns into avoidance. And for others, it turns into cycles of spending and regret. So when you combine all of this, the structural pressure, the digital comparison, the emotional patterns, you start to see something clearly. This isn't just a financial issue. It's psychological, it's social, it's generational. And if you don't understand that, it's very easy to blame yourself for patterns that were never purely individual to begin with. But there's still one critical piece missing in this puzzle. Because even after understanding all of this, there's still a gap between knowing what's happening and actually regaining control. And that gap is where most people stay stuck. And this is where everything starts to come together. Because the real problem isn't just that millennials are spending differently, it's that they're trying to make decisions inside a system that constantly distorts what enough looks like. When your environment keeps raising the standard, clarity disappears. And without clarity, even good decisions start to feel wrong. So the goal isn't just to spend less or earn more. It's to rebuild a sense of reality that isn't being shaped every second by comparison. Because once you understand what's actually happening, something shifts. You stop treating every feeling as truth. You start questioning it. That feeling of being broke, is it based on your actual numbers? Or is it based on what you've been exposed to today? That urge to spend, is it something you truly want? Or is it a reaction to feeling left out? This is where financial control really begins, not in restriction, but in awareness. Because when you can separate your real situation from the noise around you, your decisions become more intentional. You stop reacting and start choosing. Simple things start to matter more than complex strategies. Knowing your real numbers, understanding where your money actually goes, being honest about what genuinely adds value to your life and what only feels important in the moment. Because the truth is, most people aren't bad with money. They're just operating inside a distorted frame. And once that frame becomes clearer, behavior naturally changes. Not perfectly, but consciously. And maybe that's the most important shift of all, moving from feeling behind to understanding the game you're actually playing. If this video put words into something you've been feeling but couldn't explain, let me know in the comments. And if you want more content that helps you understand not just money, but the psychology behind it, subscribe.